So in terms of Gordon's work, I've just been reading Damien's book in relation to Pine Taiapa. Now, Papa Pine, I'm from the coast, and so what Teo was writing about in terms of Papa Pine makes me very, very angry, the way in which he has a distinct arrogance in relation to what Papa Pine was doing. In fact, people like Bob Yankee argue that it wasn't a Tovi generation, it was a Taiapa generation, because he's the font of knowledge that drove it all. So if we flick it round like that, exhibitions have the potential to make a real difference. Audiences go and they go to be educated, they go to learn something new, to be surprised. And so exhibitions have this capacity and have almost a remit, well, they do have a remit to address issues like this. And the City Gallery hasn't shirked away from this. I mean, they held the Manatiriti exhibition in the past, so it's not like they wanted to play it safe. And as I say, I haven't seen the Vortex. I do know Anna. I just met her last year. She was on a panel I convened at a conference. And I do think it's really important for artists to respond in different ways to art that they see. And I think that what she's doing is really interesting and something people should be sitting up and taking note of.
It's a really interesting issue. So thank you very much for making time for us here on the panel. That's Dr. Naringa Ellis, Senior Lecturer in Art History at the University of Auckland. Now, a response here from the gallery says, we strongly believe, City Gallery in Wellington, we strongly believe that the gallery is a space for, they've just emailed it to us now, is a space for debate and discussion where complex art ideas and experiences can be put in front of audiences for individual and collective thought and discussion. This exhibition is a critical assessment of Schoon's role and his encounters with various artists or art forms. The analysis of Schoon's work opens up broad cultural questions which remain of vital importance to contemporary culture, and we're placing these issues in a public arena or forum for that debate. So they're not shying away from it. So very interesting stuff. Just on a final note, I just wanted to know, in terms of dating, an Appleby man in Nelson has hit on a novel idea for the environmentally minded Singleton. Speed dating for ecosexuals. He says they are exactly what they say on the tin. A way for like-minded people to get together. The alcohol-free, the Howley every Friday at the Tahuna Nui Community Club, and the ecosexual. Are either of you enticed by speed dating with an ecosexual? Tabor. Are you an ecosexual?
I should know about these things before I come onto the panel. Just so I'm fully prepared.
Fully briefed.
Yeah.
Has it piqued your interest?
I'm not against ecosexuals, but I'm not really so keen to sign up to the event straight away either. I did have a look
Friday
though.
night?
I did as I prepared for the panel, and I thought, wow, what's the unique part around what's the eco part in this dating event, and I couldn't really see one, so that might also be why I didn't want to sign up.
He left that out. Ecosexual, Shane, yes or no?
I don't actually understand what it is. Friday night for me, I'm sleeping in front of the couch by 7:30 anyway.
Beautiful idea.
There you go.
Shane Tupou on the panel. Have a great Friday, both of you. Thanks for listening. See you Monday. Bye.
Haere mai, o te hōtaka o te ahiahi. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Alex Perrottet. Tonight, government critics say the most popular fees-free courses are probably helping those from wealthy families. 2 cousins have been jailed for their involvement in an execution-style murder after a botched Comanchero's drug deal. The Chinese army flexes its muscle with a video showing troops carrying out anti-riot exercises, a chilling message to Hong Kong protesters. The family of a woman who died from asbestos inhalation have to hold their breath again as ACC tries to appeal a decision to cover her treatment costs. And while a burst water main has people locked in their Queenstown homes, king tides are pounding the west coast. We talk to the mayor, who's telling everyone to stay home and sit by the fire. If you are home by the fire or the heat pump, you can watch us. Switch on Sky. We're on Face TV Channel 83 or Freeview Channel 50.
RNZ News at 5. Good afternoon, I'm Paul Brennan. 2 cousins have been jailed for their roles in an execution-style murder linked to the Comancheros in Mangere last year. Abraham Tuhiava was shot dead and his wife Yolanda severely injured on Greenwood Road in May. Fisilao Tapaevalu and Mesui Tufui were today jailed for life for their role in the killing. Their cousin Viliami Tani, the principal offender, was jailed last month. Justice Lang said while the trio worked together to execute the killing, he did not think it was premeditated.
If the plan was to kill Mr. Tuiava, why was that not done at the beginning of that meeting? It's inconceivable, in my view, that a person planning to kill a victim in that way would chat with them for nearly an hour and a quarter before carrying out the plan.
Tufui will serve 19 years before he's eligible for parole, while Tapo Ivalu was sentenced to a minimum period of 17 years. 2 branches of the ANZ Bank in Whangarei have been closed for the past 2 days after threats against staff. The police say the threats have been made by a man to an ANZ call taker. The police say they were notified of threats being made by a man in Whangarei to an ANZ call taker, and the branches have been closed as a precaution. The police say they're trying to locate the source of the threats, and security staff are outside each branch. People in the South Island are being warned to be aware of huge waves along the west coast and black ice on roads. Met Service has forecast severe gales for southern parts of the country with heavy rain and snow for parts of the South Island throughout the weekend. Nicholas Poynton reports.
Civil Defence is urging people to be cautious around the west coast shoreline as swells from king tides and the stormy weather could reach up to 10 metres in places. At Hector, near Westport, there are fears a decades-old toxic mine dump is at risk of being opened by the sea. The Transport Agency has also issued a warning to drivers to be cautious of black ice. It says the most hazardous areas on the roads are bridge decks and shaded areas. While most roads remain open, heavy snow has closed State Highway 94 between Milford Sound and Te Anau. Road crews will be applying de-icing compounds to keep as many routes as possible open in the lower South Island. This is Nicholas Poynton.
A burst water main in Queenstown has left people stranded, unable to drive away from their homes. Emergency services were first called shortly after 10:30 this morning to reports of flooding at the St Moritz Hotel. A council contractor ruptured the pipe, sending water gushing onto Thompson Street and flowing down. Philip Smith has been renovating his mother's house on Glasgow Street in Queenstown and has been stuck since the floods began. Vehicles are not being allowed through.
Yeah, we've got vehicles here, so we can't go anywhere. But they are letting people walk through above that top street, and then or you can go down Brunswick and sort of cut through the hotel.
Philip Smith, who is stuck at his mother's home after the burst water main in Queenstown. More than 400 more families in need will receive financial support and assistance through the iwi-led program Kainga Whānau Ora. The Minister for Social Development, Carmel Sepuloni, made the announcement in Auckland today. The government is spending $4.5 million helping 450 families living in Housing New Zealand accommodation in the Palmerston North and Whanganui regions. Ms Sepuloni says iwi will work with whānau to identify what support the families need and from which government department.
It may be upskilling and training. There may be other issues, a range of issues that people may need to get support with. And sometimes it's really hard to navigate the system. That is the point of whānau ora, and that is why we're investing in this.
Minister of Social Development, Carmel Sepuloni. A stolen car rammed a police car and left an officer injured in a chase through Auckland city centre and the North Shore. The police say the driver also tried to smash into pursuing patrol cars. Jill Bonnet reports.
The car was spotted heading towards the city centre on Tamaki Road at about 2 o'clock this afternoon, but the driver failed to stop. The Eagle helicopter tracked the car after patrol cars abandoned the chase because of concerns over how it was being driven. The 20-minute chase continued along the northern motorway and into Browns Bay until the car rammed a police vehicle in Rothesay Bay. An officer suffered what are thought to be minor injuries. A witness says at least 6 patrol cars were involved in the pursuit. One person is in police custody. Cordial Bonitaho.
Nationals accusing the government of putting cost saving ahead of incentivising people to hand in their firearms and says this is confirmed in a report which helped design the gun buyback scheme. The government has proactively released cabinet papers and official advice relating to the buyback scheme, including KPMG's report on potential pricing models. While the report didn't give any recommendations, it flagged some concerns firearm experts raised with KPMG about the 3 price points model the government ultimately went for. Nationals Police spokesperson Brett Hudson says the commentary clearly pointed to the option that would yield the best compliance, a standard price option. He says if the buyback is about making the community safe, compliance should have been top of the government list. Several roads in central Whanganui are closed as emergency services respond to reports of loose roofing iron on a fire-damaged building. The building on the corner of Taupo Quay and Victoria Avenue was gutted 2 weeks ago. Fire and emergency and the police are assessing the risk and will either secure the roofing iron or remove it. The police are asking members of the public to follow the directions of officers as this takes place, with roads around the building closed as a precaution. It's nearly 5 minutes past 5. In RNZ Sport, the Warriors say they will be well aware of the threat posed by rising star Shans Nicol-Klokstad when they face Canberra for the first time this NRL season tonight. The 24-year-old Aucklander spent 2 seasons with the Warriors under the tutelage of skipper Roger Tuivasa-Sheck and has risen to fame since joining the Raiders for this season. Warriors coach Stephen Kearney says they'll need to reduce Nicol-Klokstad's influence on the match.
But, he always had the energy and capability, Chansey, no doubt about that. Hard to find him a spot. And, we're really pleased for him, the way that he's gone. We want to try and minimise, the impact that he has on the footy game.
Stephen Kearney. And Steve Smith says a hostile crowd and an Australian cricket team in dire straits spurred him on to score one of the most memorable Ashes centuries. In his first test since completing his ban for last year's ball tampering incident in South Africa, the former skipper was greeted by a chorus of boos from England fans on day 1 of the first test at Edgbaston. Home supporters also taunted him by waving sandpaper throughout his innings. But the distractions failed as Smith scored a brilliant 144 to help Australia recover from 122 for 8 to 284 all out before England survived the final 2 overs before stumps.
Just really proud that I was able to help pull the team out of a bit of trouble. Obviously, England bowled exceptionally well in the first 2 sessions, and I'm just sort of proud that I was able to dig in and fight through those difficult periods.
Steve Smith, England will start day 2 tonight on 10 without loss, and that's the news.
Tonight on Nights, has winter finally arrived down on the farm? Country Life has probably got the answer. Marlon Williams is our Friday Night Live act, while Mark Vanilau selects the mixtape. And because this week's element, cesium, is the most reactive metal on the periodic table, we have a Sonic Tonic dedicated to sensitivity. On Nights, it's nothing personal, with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Another short forecast from Met Service through to midnight tomorrow. Watches and warnings for much of the country for strong wind, heavy rain and heavy snow in place. Northland to Kapiti, including Coromandel and the Central High Country. Showers, some heavy hail and squally thunderstorms are possible from Manawatu southwards, easing in the morning. Bay of Plenty, Gisborne, Hawke's Bay, mainly fine, but a few showers this afternoon and evening. Wairarapa and Wellington, mainly fine, though a few showers in Wairarapa spreading to Wellington tomorrow morning. Possible thunderstorms with hail in Wairarapa, becoming fine tomorrow afternoon. Nelson, Marlborough, Canterbury and North Otago scattered rain, snow above 500 metres from tonight, clearing for a time tomorrow, then returning south of Christchurch tomorrow evening. Bulla to Fiordland, the remainder of Otago and Southland, rain, squally thunderstorms possible, clearing everywhere for a time tonight and in the morning, but rain spreading from the south tomorrow afternoon. Snow down to 200 metres in the south overnight. At the Chatham Islands, occasional showers. It's nearly 5:08.
Thanks very much, Paul. Not looking like a great weekend, is it?
No, not really. Stay indoors, stay by the fire or the heater, like you just said before.
Yes, that's what the Mayor of West Coast will tell us a bit later on in the program. Do tune in and keep tuning in because we'll have more on those weather-related stories as well as what's going down in Queenstown. But first, what are fees-free students actually studying? Medical and business courses, it seems, are the primary beneficiaries of Labor's flagship policy. New figures released at Checkpoint show that medical courses at Otago University and business courses at the University of Auckland have had the highest number of students enrolled thanks to free fees. Critics of the scheme say that indicates the funds are likely helping students from wealthy families who could have afforded to go to university anyway. But the Education Minister says the government won't cherry-pick which courses are fees-free. Nita Blake-Person with this story.
It was one of Labor's flagship election policies to give new students and anyone who had done fewer than 6 months of study in the past free tertiary education. And according to figures released to Checkpoint under the Official Information Act, the scheme appears to have been most popular with students looking to pursue a career in medicine or business. The top 5 courses with the highest enrolment numbers focused on health science at Otago University. The 5th and 6th most popular were Auckland University Business and Accounting courses. Arthur Grimes is a Professor of Wellbeing and Public Policy at Victoria University and was a former chair of the Reserve Bank. He says it's not surprising the numbers are skewed towards larger courses, but it paints a picture about who is likely benefiting from the fees-free scheme.
Those kinds of courses tend to draw on students who've been in sort of upper decile schools, if you like, people coming from richer family backgrounds. So a lot of the money is going to students who are from reasonably wealthy backgrounds.
Over the first year of the scheme, just over 47,000 students and trainees received fees-free tertiary education. Among those were 74 students who had their professional scuba diploma funded at a cost of $900,000 all up. National MP Shane Reti says that rings alarm bells.
I've got a question around professional scuba instruction, 74 students at nearly $1 million, DJ and electronic music, 52 students at $163,000, and yoga, 5 students at $30,000. I'm aware of the Immigration New Zealand skills shortage list. I do not see scuba diving, DJing and yoga on the New Zealand skills shortage list.
Dr Reti says while there may be value in such courses, he's sceptical.
That may still be okay if they are scuba instructors who then generate revenue, generate income, maybe work themselves, maybe teach others. Then there's actually a logical explanation for that. It still seems like a lot of money. I'm struggling to see a productivity endpoint for DJing, and I'm struggling for yoga. That looks like personal gain. Now, again, there may be stories behind that. Maybe these are teachers who will then, or future teachers, who will then set up their own studios and be revenue generating and provide a service to the community and the people of New Zealand. So there may be some explanations underneath that. I'm uncertain, and I'd like to see the data, and I'm suspicious.
Arthur Grimes says there are questions about the value of the whole scheme. He says in the past, free tertiary education was balanced out with high taxes, but the latest iteration doesn't work that way and is geared towards rich New Zealanders.
Now we have a situation where people coming from wealthy backgrounds get free fees and they don't pay much tax because we have low tax rates in New Zealand on incomes. So we seem to have a system that really favours the wealthy both at the time when they're studying and when they're earning. And it's difficult to see the rationale for that.
But Education Minister Chris Hipkins says it would be wrong to cherry-pick some professions or vocations over others.
We were really clear. We were never going to exclude professions like medicine, like law, the white-collar professions. We were not going to exclude those from the policy. We don't exclude them from the student loan scheme. We don't exclude them from all of the other subsidies. This is a subsidy that's applied to all forms of post-school education and training, where it leads to a recognised qualification.
And as for the scuba courses,
scuba diving is an area where we actually do have a skill shortage, believe it or not. There are industries that require scuba diving. So industries with underwater infrastructure are often reliant on a scuba diving workforce, and it's not a particularly large workforce.
Labor's original policy was to extend the initial 1 year fees free to cover 2 years' worth of fees after 2020 and then 3 years' worth from 2023. As yet, there is no funding allocated for that post-2020 rollout, and Education Minister Chris Hipkins says no decisions have been made. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi pōnei, ko Nita Blake Person, aho.
Just coming up to 14 minutes past 5, you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. We are always keen for your feedback, particularly on that story, free fees, and what students are studying. Are you a fan of the policy? Have you benefited from it at all? Tell us what you think. You can text us at 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Now, severe weather forecast for the South Island's west coast has raised fears that an old toxic waste dump could be burst. And local leaders are pleading with the government to stop sitting on its hands and help clean it up before it's too late. Strong weather warnings have been in place for much of the South Island, with predictions of 8.5 metre swells and gale force winds that could reach up to 100 kilometres per hour. People who live along or near the shore have been cautioned to stay away from the beach because as the wind picks up and the tide comes in, conditions could become very dangerous. Nicholas Poynton filed this report.
Swells at the northern end of the west coast have had the area on high alert. Bulla District Mayor Gary Howard says a decades-old mine dump at Hector, 30 kilometres north of Westport, is at risk of being clawed open by the sea. He says erosion caused by storm surges in recent years has meant the dump, which is full of asbestos and industrial waste, is now extremely vulnerable.
It's on the sea. It's right there. It can't be more exposed. We've put up a number of temporary sacrificial bunds, but we need a 660,000 rock wall solution.
Mr Howard says the waste has been there since before Solid Energy, when State Coal was mining at Hector. He says the council has been asking for help from the government's Contamination Remediation Fund, but the sea won't wait.
This will be a good test this weekend, and everybody's sitting on their hands from central government. We've been appealing to government. It needs attention sooner rather than later, and it's not for our ratepayers. This is a state coal mine dump.
Torrential rain and flooding exposed a disused landfill at Fox River in March, scattering rubbish across about 75 kilometres of West Coast beaches and riverbed. Westland Mayor Bruce Smith says they are now knuckling down for what's set to be a substantial storm enhanced by king tides. He says the forecasted 10-metre swells offshore will likely mean waves of up to 8.5 metres on beaches the length of the West Coast over the weekend.
No question, we're in for some erosion, we're in for some damage, and looking, down the beach this morning, it looks pretty grumpy out there.
Mr Smith says while most West Coasters are smart enough to act responsibly, the warnings are out to steer clear of beaches over the next few days. He says the conditions create a high risk for dangerous rogue waves.
I was down at Sunset Point yesterday, and a wave come through that was a metre higher than everything else. I couldn't believe it, and so you got to be really careful. And it's common sense, isn't it? You just stay home, stay by the fire.
Hector resident Brent Dyerberg has lived on the coast for 13 years. He says while the weather has been mild so far today, he and his partner are expecting worse to come.
Well, so far we've had just a couple of squalls come through, clap of thunder, not a lot of rain or hail, so not too bad at the moment. It's just sort of like the calm before the storm.
Met Service meteorologist Lewis Ferris says they have recorded wind gusts of up to 80 kilometres per hour along the coast. However, he says winds are expected to pick up tonight.
The strong wind watch for Bulla, Nelson and Marlborough, it's from 4 p.m. today, Friday, to 7 a.m. tomorrow.
Met Service is forecasting further bad weather for parts of the country for the rest of the weekend. Another active front is expected to move along the South Island from tomorrow through to Monday, bringing cold snaps and strong winds along with it. For Checkpoint, this is Nicholas Poynton.
Just come up to 18 past 5. We've just got a text in from someone just north of Hector who says the wind is howling there right now, and let us know what it's like. If you are in the region there, do let us know. If the winds are picking up, if those tides are getting high. We've been told it's 8 or maybe even 9 metre swells. So do get in touch if you're seeing extreme weather there, particularly on the west coast. But we'll go to Queenstown right now, where people have been trapped in their houses today after a burst water main sent water gushing through the streets, cutting them off from the resort town. Now, the rupture was caused when a council contractor hit the pipe earlier today, causing water to cascade onto Thompson Street and flow down the hill. Tess Brunton has more.
Philip Smith is renovating his mother's house on Glasgow Street, just off Thompson Street, where a burst water main late this morning left behind a trail of destruction.
The road that it's sort of on isn't too bad, where the water's coming from, but then it's the street below that has had a bit of a mudslide that pushed some cars around and flooded the hotel entrance there. That goes down into this entrance, so not a really good idea not a good sort of situation with water flowing down into it.
There was also flooding around the entrance of the St Moritz Hotel. Vehicles weren't allowed through the floodwaters.
Yeah, we've got vehicles here, so we can't go anywhere. But they are letting people walk through above that top street, and then or you can go down Brunswick and sort of cut through the hotel. I did see some rather nervous people with carrying suitcases that were trying to get to the airport, so they had to get down onto the main road to get a taxi.
It was not your average call-out for Queenstown Volunteer Fire Brigade Deputy Chief Bobby Lamont. His fire crew arrived to find water and gravel flowing down Brunswick Street not long after the job was called in, shortly after 10:30.
We couldn't see the water main. It was buried underwater still, large amounts flowing out of it, so we couldn't get visual on that. I'm not sure whether it's a 300 mil water main running through there, but there was a fair amount of water, and enough to push a couple of parked cars across to the other side of the road.
Water swept along roads and through private properties, leaving gravel, grass and other debris scattered in its wake. A clean-up is underway to remove the debris that entered Lake Wakatipu. Bobby Lamont says he wasn't disappointed when the fire crew was given the all-clear to leave.
It was a good steady rain. We had some snow showers coming through and snow lowering to probably 150 metres above where we were, so it was pretty cold and pretty wet and not that pleasant.
Queenstown Lakes District Council Program Director Gareth Noble says a burst main is thankfully a rarity.
A contractor was doing some work for us to evaluate ground conditions on a road on a relatively deep incline, so when I got there you could see some of the sediment that had travelled down the hill and traffic management in place and the site being managed by our two contractors.
Council contractors hope to fix the pipe by 8 o'clock tonight. For Checkpoint, Cortes Brunton, Tane.
There's plenty of people getting in touch about our stories, but do get in touch if you're in Queenstown as well and affected by that burst water main there that Tess was just reporting on. It's 21 and a half minutes past 5. The sister-in-law of a woman who died from cancer after inhaling asbestos says she's disappointed that ACC is appealing a High Court decision to have her expensive bills paid. Now, Diana Trevathan inhaled the deadly asbestos as a child at her father's workplace and at home. He was an electrician and she would visit the workplace to play and would hug him and his contaminated clothing. She died at the age of 45 in 2016 after her battle with cancer and ACC. ACC had argued she wasn't covered because she hadn't contracted the disease as a result of her own work. But last month, the High Court dismissed that argument, ruling that her illness was a result of inhaling asbestos fibres and that was a personal injury caused by an accident. Angela Culver is Diana's sister-in-law and says the family raised $8,000 every 3 weeks to pay for the drug Keytruda, just to extend Diana's life before the mesothelioma won out. Angela says she was dancing for joy at last month's court decision, but for now, that's been put off.
It's really disappointing, actually. Yeah, I mean, the whole thing with asbestos exposure is quite unfair as it sits at the moment. Not unfair, unjust. And, to have argued the law within the ACC Act and have had a judge who's quite considered in these matters come out with a large judgment, which was pretty complete. And now ACC are appealing. It's just really disappointing.
Yeah, I mean, the legal minds around the country detached from the personal circumstances of this might be interested at what the Court of Appeal is going to decide in terms of it being a real test case. But this is personal for you, and you had it in your favour, and that was after a long battle and an expensive one as well. So there is a lot riding on this, isn't there?
There is. And we've been very lucky with John Miller Law. They have been great. But at the end of the day, we're going to have to take a very considered decision now, because ACC have plenty of resource and cash in the bank. That's not the case for us. So we've got a few decisions to make from here. But they have to apply for leave to appeal, and that goes to the High Court. And they review on what grounds ACC are appealing, and ACC will be granted leave to appeal or not. So there's another step. There's lots of steps in this process. It's great when the steps go your way and you can do a little dance, and not so great on other days. The thing with mesothelioma that makes it quite specific is you have to have accidentally inhaled asbestos fibres to get mesothelioma. So it is a disease, but it's not a typical disease.
That's right. I think they said there were 2 steps to it.
It comes back to even to me for, one of the things that Labor said in their pre-election papers was that they would look at changing the ACC Act to cover secondary asbestos exposure because it is going to be a problem for our country, which is why we decided to carry on when when Labor haven't changed the ACC Act. There's many components to this, and mesothelioma is a very different disease to many other diseases,
and different from even I think what they call the other significant disease with people who are exposed to asbestosis, or whatever it's called. But I think it's that asbestosis. Thanks, because there's that, as you say, a secondary element. One is the asbestos being lodged there in the lung, and the secondary effect is that type of lung cancer that can develop from it. And of course, that's what Diana contracted, and that's what she died from. I wanted to ask you, what's happened since the decision? Had you been paid out in any way? I mean, you were paying $8,000 every 3 weeks for Keytruda. I mean, have you received anything since the decision?
No.
So there's a bit of a nervous wait now, really, for this court case. But from the tone we're getting from you, you're not so certain you're going to be able to, if they do get leave to appeal. You're not so certain you're going to be there.
Look, I have to consider it. I've got 2 kids. We've been working with John Miller Law, and they've been great. We have to throw all of this up in the air and understand the costs of going to the Court of Appeal. But on the other hand, like I said last time, I made a promise to Deanna that I would see this through and get this changed for all of the people that couldn't afford $8,000 every 3 weeks, for all of the people that in good faith hugged their dad or went on their worksite or washed the dad's clothes, or the mum that was on the worksite. After the Christchurch earthquakes, we've got so much asbestos in our schools. Aftershocks, it takes one fibre, and no one would run around inhaling this stuff on purpose. So it is accidental inhalation of asbestos, which directly causes mesothelioma. And I promised Dee I would fight the fight. She didn't want anyone else to have to deal with this. Deanna was very giving, honest, beautiful woman. Yeah.
That's Angela Calver. She's the sister-in-law of Diana Trevarthen, and she says she's fighting on for Diana as well as all those others seeking cover for asbestos-related diseases that could be classified, and should be, as accidents. The High Court will first consider the application from ACC and decide whether it will give the agency leave to head to the Court of Appeal. Now, there's been a bit of feedback coming in, particularly on Nita Blake-Person's report on the fees-free policy. This is the one where statistics say that there's a lot of people taking up medicine courses at Otago as well as business courses in Auckland, and that seems to be helping wealthy families, perhaps not those that the Labor policy were trying to target. Dave has got in touch from Christchurch. He says, Ari, the free fees policy, the cost of fees is a real barrier to low-income families, so this policy should help improve the socio-economic balance in future doctors and lawyers. I support that. Thanks, Dave. Free fees. Universities March to October. There's plenty of downtime to earn money. Thank you. Isn't it possible that the medical and business courses are now attracting people who previously couldn't afford to enrol? If so, bravo. We desperately need more people from diverse backgrounds in those professions. That bit of feedback echoing that from Dave. Chris from Dunedin says yoga and diving are popular activities that people like doing or watching. National is attacking the fitness and music industries. That's from Chris. In fact, on the email, Ursula's got in touch in the same way. She says, Jacinda, our Prime Minister, is a disc jockey who's now Prime Minister. Surely past DJing helps her to be flexible and be a people person. Dissing DJs is very snobby. Thank you, Ursula. A considered approach there. And Jeff has been in touch. The principle of removing barriers to education is the right one. Currently, the uptake of the free fees scheme may not be as expected, but it is early days. The student loan scheme has created a millstone around the neck of too many families and blighted the existence of many graduates. So anything that lightens that burden is welcome. That's Jeff's point of view. Thanks very much to all of you for getting in touch, and we will see if we can get some more feedback a bit later in the program. It's just gone 5:30 on Checkpoint and RNZ National. Coming up, 6,000 people in a town in the English country of Derbyshire are evacuated as a dam threatens to give way, and 2 cousins are jailed for their roles in an execution-style murder linked to the Comancheros gang. We'd love your feedback. Get in touch. 2101 is the text. Tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. We're on Facebook, Checkpoint, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. First, here's Paul Brennan with the headlines.
Thank you, Alex. 2 cousins have been jailed for their roles in an execution-style murder linked to the Comancheros in Mangere last year. Abraham Ha'ava was shot dead, and his wife Yolanda severely injured on Greenwood Road in May. Fisilau Tapa Evalu and Masui Tufui were jailed for life today for their role in the killing. Their cousin Viliami Tani, the principal offender, was jailed last month. 2 branches of the ANZ Bank in Whangarei have been closed for the past 2 days after threats against staff. The police said they were notified of threats being made by a man in Whangarei, and the branches have been closed as a precaution. A burst water main in Queenstown has left some people stranded, unable to drive away from their homes. Emergency services were first called out late this morning to reports of flooding at the St. Moritz Hotel after the nearby pipe was ruptured by a contractor. People in the South Island are being warned to be aware of huge waves along the west coast as black ice on roads. Med Services forecast severe gales for southern parts of the country with heavy rain and snow for parts of the South Island throughout the weekend. Civil Defence is urging people to be cautious around the west coast shoreline as swells from king tides and the stormy weather could reach up to 10 metres in places. At Hector, near Westport, there are fears a decades-old toxic mine dump is at risk of being opened by high seas. A stolen car has rammed a police car and left an officer injured in a chase through Auckland city centre and the North Shore. The police say the driver refused to stop after the car was spotted heading towards the city centre this afternoon. The Eagle helicopter was used to track it after patrol cars abandoned the chase because of the dangerous manner of driving. A person is in police custody. And those are the headlines.
Thanks very much, Paul. Madison Reedy is here again for Business News. Good evening to you.
Good evening.
It's a cold, wintry night around the country, and you're here to tell us that consumers have the winter blues as well.
Yes, consumers do have the winter blues. The latest Consumer Confidence Index survey, it actually fell 6 points in the month of July to a level of 116. Now, that's below the historical average, which is 120. And this is actually the lowest this survey result has been since October last year, so in 8 months. So that means that this is the lowest consumers have felt all year this year. Now, they're feeling slightly more worried about their current financial situation, but they're feeling very worried about their future financial situation. That particular measure in this survey is actually at its lowest point in 4 years. Now, economists reckon that consumers are feeling this downbeat this winter because of global economic concerns creating some uncertainty, and also because businesses are looking to reduce their investment, which means that they're looking to hire less people, which is probably making consumers worried about their future job prospects. And actually, talking about businesses, we did have a business confidence survey come out earlier this week, and that actually showed that businesses are feeling the least confident they have in about a year since August last year. That survey showed that a net 44% of businesses were expecting economic conditions to worsen over the next 12 months, and that's up from 38% of businesses the month before.
Wow. But there's record highs for share markets. That's paying off for KiwiSavers.
Do you like how I did the bad news first and then I'm going to finish it with good news?
Better.
Always better. Always do it that way.
And then the markets is like neutral anyway, isn't it?
Oh, it is actually neutral today.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, it is. There you go.
I picked it.
So the good news first. So Morningstar's done some research on KiwiSaver returns for the 3 months to June. Now, they found that all KiwiSaver funds actually did have positive returns in that quarterly period. Aggressive funds particularly, they had average returns of just over 10% in the quarter. Conservative funds had returns of 3.5%. Now, Morningstar says that that's largely because share markets both here and around the world have been having record highs lately. So the NZX Top 50 had a rise of 6.7% in its value over the 3 months to June. Our counterparts across the Tasman and Australia, the ASX Top 200, they were up 8% in their value. Now, to put this in dollar terms, which typically grabs more people's attention, that growth has taken KiwiSaver assets to a value of $57.2 billion. Now, in June, around this time last year, they were worth below $50 million at $48.7 billion. Sorry, I meant to say billion there, not billion. Billion. It's a tricky one on a Friday evening.
It's got better by almost 10 billion.
Yes.
That's not bad. So onto those neutral markets.
Those neutral markets, the NZX Top 50 Index closed up just 3 points tonight, barely worth mentioning, to close at 10,863. The New Zealand dollar, that's buying at 65.4 US cents, 96 to the Australian and 54 British pence, and just a bit of shameless self-promotion to end the week as well. If you need more business news in your weekend, we have our business podcast 2 cents worth, which is up online at the moment, or you can listen wherever you get your podcasts, possibly Apple or Spotify. And this week's 2 cents worth podcast is in fact my own. It's all about the growing prevalence of scams and what banks and the government are, or in some cases aren't doing to fight it.
Very good. Well, everyone's going to be at home wrapped up, so there'll be plenty of time to listen
Nothing
to that,
better to listen to, in my opinion.
Good on you. Thanks very much, Madison. Madison Reddy there, shamelessly self-promoting 2 cents worth. Listen to her 2 cents worth this weekend if you get a chance. It's coming up to, 24 minutes to 6. Residents living near the scene of a massive explosion in Christchurch say they still don't know what caused the blast. One home was completely destroyed and others damaged when a house suddenly exploded in the suburb of Northwood 2 weeks ago today. While Fire and Emergency quickly said on the day that it was a gas explosion, the investigation into what actually happened could take up to a year. But residents and local authorities say they need the answers far sooner. Our South Island reporter Logan Church and videographer Simon Rogers filed this report.
Local resident Tony Pringle says he'll never forget the day of the explosion.
Well, we were just sitting in the lounge and we heard an almighty bang, and we thought something fell down in the garage, but it actually shook the house, and we're just about 2 kilometres away, way down by the shopping centre.
2 weeks on, Marble Court still resembles a war zone. 2 people remain in hospital. Some of the owners of the properties are here today trying to empty their homes into removal trucks and shipping containers. I spoke to some of them earlier. None of them wanted to go on camera, but you can really see the stress on their faces. One man I spoke to had actually moved out here from the east after his house was very badly damaged from the earthquakes. He came here trying to find some peace and quiet, which obviously is not what he's found. But even looking around today, we can see that much of the street is very much as it was 2 weeks ago, although construction fencing has been put up around many of the properties in this cul-de-sac. Behind it we can see piles of cladding, broken garage doors, windows lying on the ground, all those gaps boarded up with bits of plywood, and that continues for many of the homes around here. But as we turn to the house which was really at the centre of the explosion 2 weeks ago, not much has changed at all. A mobile police base sits outside, but looking onto the property we can see that the cars inside the garage are still destroyed, the walls still buckled in, that roof completely collapsed. It's still a real complete mess, and it's going to be some time before this street is back to normal. But it's not just residents on the streets that are trying to get their lives back together. Many of the properties on surrounding streets were also damaged from flying debris and the sheer force of the explosion. Among them is Jovan Marinkovic.
In my house was several damages on the light switching because the lights was quite heavy. Garage was damaged, and when was a person from insurance came, and within 2 days time was a builder coming and make assessment, and he realized that all G-board has to be in the triple garage. removed and to make new one, and sealing as well.
While Jovan is pleased with how swiftly his insurance company is dealing with his situation, he thinks what this community actually needs is answers. An investigation into what caused the explosion could take up to a year.
People, they need answer. I'm not saying over the night for 24 hours, because that is understandable. Nobody can't arrange that. But yes, it's a little bit long period.
A view shared by Tony Pringle.
People want peace of mind before then, We haven't been notified what happened or what caused it, so it's taken quite a while to sort out.
Back in town, the councillor for the Northwood area, Aaron Kewen, says several issues have been raised with the council.
The one that's been raised is around rates payments, so I can't say what the outcome would be, but certainly there was a different system put in place post-quake, and we would be looking at can we make any changes for those residents this time round. No promises yet, but the questions have certainly been asked.
But he also agrees that answers are needed.
If we could get even it might not be a signed off final story, but basically this is what we believe happened, and so on and so forth, and yes, you are safe, or no, you should get this and this checked. At least that, an update. Some of the timelines that I'm hearing are extraordinary. There's still a number of them that kind of wake up in the morning and go, that really happened, and we no longer have a house, and we're going to have to go through the whole process of rebuilding a house, and that's a shock to almost anyone.
Checkpoint approached Fire and Emergency to ask how the investigation was going. It said it couldn't comment today other than say it is still continuing. In Christchurch for Checkpoints, Logan Church.
It's 19 minutes to 6. Two cousins have been jailed for their roles in an execution-style murder linked to the Comancheros gang. Abraham Tu'uheava was shot dead and his wife Yolanda severely injured on Greenwood Road, Mangere, in May last year. Fisilau Tapaivalu and Mesui Tufui will now join their cousin Viliami Taani behind bars after both were jailed for life for their roles in the shooting. Our court reporter Annika Smith filed this story.
Abraham Tu'uheava arrived at Greenwood Road in the late hours of April 30 last year with $63,000 in cash. The Patch Nomads member was there for a methamphetamine deal with the Comancheros. His wife Yolanda stayed in the car while he got out and spoke to Viliami Taani. More than an hour passed before he screamed and came running back to the car.
Mrs. Tu'uheava then looked out the window and saw a man with a gun. She then described a series of events in which she and her husband were ordered at gunpoint to walk to the edge of the road.
Justice Lang said Mrs. Tu'uheava had identified Taani and Tufui as the armed men. At trial, the court heard the shooting may have been a hit ordered by the Comancheros in Australia. Tufui told police he overheard Taani say they'd been given the green light to kill them. The Tu'uheavas begged for their lives before trying to make a break for it.
They then began running down the road. At least one shot was fired. The evidence suggests that at that point, as they ran away, Mr. Taani went back to the vehicle. I am satisfied, Mr. Tufui, you carried on down the road with the shotgun you were holding.
Tufui chased the pair on foot while Tapaivalu drove Taani down the road.
At that point, Mr. Taani got out and a large number of shots were fired. 7 of these struck Mr. Tu'uheava. At or about the same time, Mr. Taani discharged 2 shots at Mrs. Tu'uheava. He then changed weapons and shot her twice in the head with a .38 Smith & Wesson revolver.
Much of what is known about that night is drawn from the memory of Mrs. Tu'uheava, who still has a bullet lodged in her brain. She pretended to be dead to save her life and was found lying next to her husband by a passing motorist the following morning. Viliami Taani admitted his role in the shooting and was jailed for life with a minimum non-parole period of 17.5 years last month. Tufui and Tapaivalu, however, pleaded not guilty to charges. At trial, Tapaivalu said he didn't know about a plan to hurt the Tu'uheavas, while Tufui told police it was a case of mistaken identity. In the end, the jury found them both guilty of murder and attempted murder, but today Justice Lang said he didn't think the killing was premeditated.
If the plan was to kill Mr. Tu'uheava, why was that not done at the beginning of that meeting? It's inconceivable, in my view, that a person planning to kill a victim in that way would chat with them for nearly an hour and a quarter before carrying out the plan.
Tafui previously admitted a charge of possessing methamphetamine, while Tapaivalu pleaded guilty to 2 charges each of possessing methamphetamine and unlawful possession of a firearm. In the High Court at Auckland this morning, Justice Lang jailed both men for life. Tafui will serve 19 years before he is eligible for parole, while Tapaivalu was sentenced to a minimum term of 17 years. Atuiti ko te matua ko Annika Smith-Aho.
It's just coming up to 5:45 on RNZ National. You're listening to Checkpoint. I'm Alex Perrottet. We are keen for your feedback. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at checkpointrnz, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. We're on Facebook as well. You can leave a message there. You can watch the live stream on our website as well. Many ways to get in touch and to watch and listen to the program. A town of more than 6,000 people in the English country of Derbyshire has been evacuated as a dam threatens to give way. Parts of the wall of the Toddbrook Reservoir Dam collapsed following heavy rain. Now, the dam is above the town of Whaley Bridge, and a severe flood warning, meaning there is threat to life, has been issued. The BBC's Judith Morris has the details.
A whole community affected, with little time to think, just an urgency to get to safety as quickly as possible. The dam, which has protected their town for nearly 200 years, tonight dangerously close to collapsing. Whaley Bridge now looks like a ghost town. People asked to leave their homes and businesses and get out of the area.
I finished my shift at 2 o'clock, drove back down to Whaley Bridge to go home, and the police stopped me and said, "You cannot go into the village." I said, "But I'm a resident, I need to get in to get home," and he said, "No." I said, "Well, my partner's at home with the dog," and he said, "Ring him and just tell him to get out."
Probably a precaution, isn't it, really? It's you can't risk it, can you, really? If something happens to the dam, then I think we're all getting wet.
Here's the reason. Intense rain yesterday caused a torrent of water to overflow the dam. Damage was caused to its concrete panels, and today fears grew that the whole structure may not hold. Sandbags have been put along the top of the reservoir to try to stop it overflowing again.
The pumps are just in the village now, and they're going up the hill to be installed to start reducing the flow. But there's also diversions up at the top to avoid further water going into the reservoir. And as you know, there's a severe weather warning this evening, so we're all working flat out to try and ensure that we can avert any crises.
The emergency services have set up a command centre in nearby Chapel-on-the-Frith, and accommodation has been offered to thousands of people who are preparing to spend the night away from home.
Well, the police have taken over evacuating Whaley Bridge and done an absolutely superb job. Got about 85% of the people out already. There's obviously 1 or 2 people that don't want to leave and refusing to leave. So, but we know where they are if there's a problem.
There's relief that everyone has been contacted and given the chance to get away, but anxiety too as the rain continues to fall, and the realisation that a local beauty spot suddenly poses a real mortal danger.
That's Judith Morris there from Whaley Bridge in Derbyshire. And it's coming up to 12 minutes to 6. Just some traffic news now. Police have got in touch and they tell us they're responding to a crash in Kingseat in South Auckland. They're asking drivers to expect delays. Police were called about 4:20pm today to reports that a 6-wheel truck collided with a power pole. This is at the intersection of Linwood, Kingseat and McRobbie roads. There's no reports of serious injuries, but the power lines have partially come down as a result of that collision. The police say part of the road is currently closed and is expected to be closed for some time as contractors work to clear the scene and repair the power line. So drivers advised to expect delays and also asked to avoid the area if they can. It's Kingseat near Pukekohe in South Auckland. It's 11.5 minutes to 6. In Hong Kong, the Chinese army has released a 3-minute video showing troops carrying out anti-riot exercises and what's being seen as a message to pro-democracy protesters. Until earlier this week, the Chinese government had chosen to not communicate directly with the Hong Kong public. That changed when the Beijing office responsible for Hong Kong held a news conference, its first in many years, to tell Hong Kongers the protests were, quote, unacceptable. Now, a disturbing video from the People's Liberation Army has emerged, showing in detail the violent riot control the PLA could impose. The BBC's Lydia Noble has more.
Tanks, rocket launchers, missiles. All appear in this dramatic video released by China's army in Hong Kong, considered to be a thinly veiled threat to Hong Kong's pro-democracy protesters. The video shows heavily armed troops performing anti-riot drills, descending from helicopters, patrolling the streets, and shooting their way into people's houses. There are also images of what appear to be protesters, or people acting as protesters, being arrested and walked to detention points, with their arms tied behind their backs. Violent anti-government protests have been disrupting Hong Kong for 2 months, but so far, China's People's Liberation Army has stayed out of them, allowing Hong Kong's police force to deal with the unrest. But in comments reported by the South China Morning Post, the PLA garrison commander in Hong Kong stated yesterday that the protests had seriously threatened the life and safety of Hong Kong citizens, violated the bottom line of one country, two systems, and could not be tolerated. The video's release will fuel concerns that China will use military force to end the protests. But the government is still refusing to address such concerns directly. When asked, the Chinese Foreign Ministry in Beijing said only that the military would be able to interpret the video's message.
Lydia Noble reporting there, coming up to 9 minutes to 6. I've got a little bit more feedback on the free fees policy. Nita Blake-Person with her report earlier saying that it seems, at least people are saying, the uptake of medical courses in Otago business in Auckland might suggest that the policy has been taken up by wealthier people, and people have been getting in touch all evening about that. Free fees, nothing but a vote grabber, this listener says, a policy the country can ill afford. Typically, the decision of whether to engage in tertiary education is not based on fees, but rather a preferred career. Free fees would be great if the country could afford it and healthcare and earlier education and charities are fully funded. That listener is saying that the government needs to look at its priorities. It is a flagship policy. Veronica from Wellington says, I started uni straight out of school 1 year before the fees free came in. Even my friends who are receiving it think it should have started at uni students' third year, and the rollout brought down the year levels as students have proven they're able to study. C'est la vie, I'm hardly a policy consultant. Well, thanks. You're our consultant, Veronica from Wellington. Thank you for getting in touch. We'll see if we can get to a bit more of your feedback later on. It's coming up to 8 minutes to 6. Coal miners in the US state of Kentucky are in a standoff with their company, which has unexpectedly filed for bankruptcy, leaving more than 400 workers without pay. They've mounted a sit-in on the railway track and are blocking a train carrying coal from leaving. Kentucky is in the heart of Trump country, and as part of his election campaign, Donald Trump promised to resurrect America's coal industry. Here's CNN's Alexandra Field.
They didn't pay our 401k in, they didn't pay our child support in, and our last check's bounced. We want our money.
Miners in Kentucky are taking to the tracks, blocking the coal they've collected from shipping out until they're paid their due.
We worked for it, we earned it, and we deserve it. And that's why we're standing here today, and we're not going to go nowhere until we find out if we're going to get it.
Once the nation's 6th largest coal producers, Black Jewel and its parent company locked their gates July 1st, filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy without warning its workers, leaving them without a paycheck for weeks.
It's been rough the last month because I ain't had no money coming in.
CNN affiliate WYMT confirms Black Jewel's former CEO sent an apology letter to employees saying he accepts responsibility for the company's downfall, adding he had tried to get a loan to cover employee pay. Now, WYMT reports Black Jewel is auctioning off its mines in Wyoming, Virginia, West Virginia, and Kentucky through bankruptcy court. All but Virginia voted for President Trump.
We're putting our miners back to work like never before. They're going back.
Now miners say they need his support more than ever. Neither Black Jewel or its parent company have responded to requests for comment, but if their coal mines aren't auctioned successfully, these families will have to find a new way to make ends meet.
Coal miners are very tough, strong men. But when it comes to your kids, you're going to break. And to not be able to provide for him or get for him or anything like that, that hurts.
That was a Kentucky coal miner, ending that report from CNN's Alexandra Field at 6 minutes to 6. To the UK now, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson's governing Conservative Party lost a special election today, leaving it with just a one-vote working majority in Parliament as Brexit looms. In the Conservatives' first electoral test since Boris Johnson became Prime Minister 9 days ago, the party was defeated for the seat of Brecon and Radnorshire in Wales by the Liberal Democrats. The BBC's Jonathan Blake has more.
The votes had been cast and the counting could begin. Conservatives fighting to hold on, Liberal Democrats sensing a chance. Both sides knew it would be close.
I do hereby declare that Jane Dodds is duly elected Member of Parliament for the said constituency.
A win for the party that campaigned against Brexit and a message to the new Prime Minister from Parliament's newest member.
My very first act as your MP when I arrive in Westminster will be to find Mr Boris Johnson wherever he's hiding and tell him loud and clear, stop playing with the future of our communities and rule out a no-deal Brexit now.
Liberal Democrats threw everything at this by-election, although they held back from their staunch stop Brexit message, knowing it might cost them votes in a constituency finely balanced between Leave and Remain. In the end, it was a narrow victory, but one the Lib Dems will say shows that they're a party on the up. The Liberal Democrats were helped here by other anti-Brexit parties standing aside. It was a terrible result for Labour, who finished a distant fourth. The Brexit Party managed third, maybe costing the Conservatives a win. Defeat will be deeply felt.
Jonathan Blake reporting. Finding one rocket launcher in someone's luggage is unusual for airport security, but 2 in 1 week is kind of unusual, even in the US. The rocket launch tube was discovered in the American Airlines baggage area of an airport in Maryland. The US Army says there's nothing to worry about, but passengers are questioning the wisdom of allowing the weapons on a domestic flight. CNN's Kim Dacey reports from Baltimore.
Kind of a strange thing to put in your checked baggage.
Strange indeed to find not one, but 2 separate military missile launchers in baggage at BWI Airport just days apart.
It's something that, while not common, and it sort of does raise alarm for travelers when they hear rocket launcher or missile launcher, it's really just a tube, just the vessel.
Neither launcher was loaded, but when TSA discovered them, they called in the state fire marshal's bomb squad to be safe. Both were found in the checked luggage of active military members coming home from overseas with a souvenir. Empty missile launchers are allowed on military flights, but not their connecting commercial flights.
There's a slim chance that the tube could have pressurized gas that would not be stable in the air. It's very slim, but there's really no way to tell if it has that. So out of an abundance of caution, commercial flights just don't allow that in checked luggage.
Travelers at BWI say they're glad TSA confiscated them before they ended up on a flight.
That would scare me. Even though they're supposed to be empty, how do we know they really are?
Well, I don't want that stuff like on the plane that I'm on. You can never tell if it's live or not.
The state bomb squad is holding on to the missile launchers in case those military members still want them. Some travelers we found question the military policy.
I don't understand even the military allowing that. You know, that they allow that, but is that common practice? Does that happen a lot? Is this happening at other airports? I don't know.
Kim Dacey with that report. It's coming up to 6 p.m. where we'll have the news, but before that, we've got lots of feedback. Thanks to everyone for getting in touch. Nita Blake-Person's report on the fees-free policy by Labor, the flagship policy, the one that you might remember came in right at the beginning of the government's term. JK has got in touch and says that Labor deal is ridiculous. It should never apply to year one. We've had a few people responding saying that it should kick in perhaps in the third year once the student has proved themselves and committed to paying their way through at least the first 2 years. JK says the best policy would be to pay for the last year of the degree. That is when the hardest work is required and would ensure no silly freeloaders waste a year of our money and then quit. We remember a lot of people saying that at the time. Malcolm has another point of view. He says It's highly probable that students attending courses for high-paying courses would still enrol regardless of the fees-free scheme. This is Malcolm on the email. He says the opposite would apply for students from low-income families. Accordingly, if enrolments in these courses have risen, it's more than likely the extra have come from low-income families. In any case, the scheme does no harm to low-income families. Thanks for that, Malcolm. And now Jeremy. Tēnā koe, Jeremy. He says, we have a friend in his 50s who, through no fault of his own, has had a tough life so far. Now he's getting his head above water. He's looking to apply his considerable mind to his work future. He's hugely grateful for the free first-year study opportunity so he can have training in his chosen skill. Thanks very much for getting in touch, Jeremy. Some people for, some people against, as is going to happen. Keep your feedback coming in. 2101 is the text. checkpoint@rnz.co.nz is the email. More after 6.
RNZ News at 6. No mai, haere mai. Good evening, I'm Paul Brennan. The family of a woman who inhaled asbestos and died from cancer says they're nervously waiting to see if ACC will be allowed to appeal a High Court decision to have her expensive bills paid. Diana Trevathan inhaled the deadly asbestos as a child at her father's workplace and died in 2016 after a battle with cancer and ACC. ACC had argued she wasn't covered because she hadn't contracted the disease as a result of her own work. But last month, the High Court dismissed that argument, ruling she died as a result of inhaling asbestos fibres, which was a personal injury caused by an accident. Angela Calver, Diana's sister-in-law, thought that would be it.
To have argued the law within the ACC Act and have had a judge who's quite considered in these matters come out with a large judgment, which was pretty complete, and now ACC are appealing. It's just really disappointing.
Angela Calver speaking on Checkpoint. A judge says 3 cousins worked together in an execution-style murder linked to the Comancheros in Mangere last year. Abraham Tu'uhaeva was shot dead and his wife Yolanda severely injured on Greenwood Road in May. Fisilau Tapa Ivalu and Masui Tafui were today jailed for life for their role in the killing. Their cousin, Viliami Tani, the principal offender, was jailed last month. Justice Lang said while the trio worked together, he did not think the killing was premeditated. The police minister says the government struck the best balance it could in developing the gun buyback scheme. Cabinet papers and official advice relating to the buyback scheme have been proactively released, including KPMG's report on potential pricing models. National says KPMG's report vindicates their concern that the government chose the 3 price points buyback option because it was cheaper, despite warnings it could discourage compliance. But Stuart Nash says that's simply not the case. He says the government weighed up all the advice and chose the 3-tier model based on police advice and because it was the fairest.
You go to a 5-tier model and you introduce a level of complexity which can be quite difficult. You go to a 1-tier model where you just pay the same price for everyone, and then you get some people who will feel incredibly ripped off and some people who will have made a hell of a lot of money out of their firearms. Now that just was never going to work.
Stuart Nash. Donald Trump is once again ramping up his trade war with China by announcing new tariffs. Tariffs on $450 billion worth of Chinese imports will be imposed. They come despite earlier comments from Mr. Trump describing the latest trade talks between the two countries in Shanghai as constructive. He told a rally of supporters in Ohio that China has been taking advantage of the US for years.
We've been losing hundreds of billions of dollars a year to China. It has to stop, and they understand that. President Xi is a good man. He's a friend of mine. He understands it. And until such time as there is a deal, we will be taxing the hell out of China. That's all there is.
The new 10% tariffs on Chinese goods will mean increases in prices for many everyday products, including smartphones and clothing. A Rainbow community group is greeting the move to wipe charges for people wanting to change their sex on their birth certificate. As of yesterday, applicants wanting to change their sex on their birth certificate won't have to pay the fees of up to $95. The government scrapped the fee and has taken steps to make the process of changing a registered sex easier. Rainbow Youth's Executive Director Frances Ahns says the cost may seem small, but cutting it will make a big difference.
This $95 is in the context of all of the other costs that you have when you are going through trying to change your legal documents, the other support that you might need throughout that process.
Rainbow Youth Executive Director Frances Ahns. Medical courses at Otago University and business courses at the University of Auckland have had the highest number of students enrolled thanks to the government's fees-free funding. The fees free was one of Labour's flagship election policies to give new students and anyone who had done fewer than 6 months of study in the past 1 year of free tertiary education. Figures released to Checkpoint show the 5 courses with the highest enrolment numbers focus on health science at Otago University. The 5th and 6th most popular were University of Auckland business and accounting courses. A burst water main in Queenstown caused chaos in the centre of town today, rendering several streets impassable for vehicles. A council contractor hit and ruptured a pipe near Thompson Street this morning, and the resulting torrent damaged some cars and meant some residents could not leave their homes. One street has reopened tonight, but 2 others will remain closed overnight. The Queenstown Council says parts of Mann and Thompson Streets will be closed until mid-morning tomorrow. And the South Island's Lewis Pass is closed between Hamner Springs and Reefton due to heavy snow. The Milford Road between Tiano and Milford closed earlier today, and it will remain shut overnight and tomorrow. The Transport Agency is warning all South Island drivers to be aware of snow, ice and wind on roads this weekend. It's just after 6:04. On to RNZ Sport now. The Warriors have identified New Zealand fullback Chance Nicol-Klokstad as a player to shut down tonight in their NRL clash against Canberra at Mount Smart Stadium. The youngster, who was once mentored by Warriors skipper Roger Tuivasa-Sheck, has this season become one of the competition's most dangerous fullbacks. Warriors coach Stephen Kearney says they are well aware of the threat Nicol-Klokstad poses.
Wonderfully balanced, footy team. They get out of the backfield really well, with some outside backs, Jordan and young Simonson and obviously Chance, and very clever dummy half who puts them in the right positions at the right time. And that's, what brings them into the game. It's got to be a collective commitment on Friday.
Stephen Kearney. Tonight's match kicks off at 8 o'clock. The Black Caps spinner Will Somerville says they're confident they will be safe as they head off for their tour of Sri Lanka. The Test match squad flew out of Auckland today for the New Zealand cricket team's first matches since the World Cup. More than 350 people were killed in terror attacks in Sri Lanka this April. But Somerville says the players are confident in the advice handed down by New Zealand Cricket and the Players Association.
We're sort of backing that advice and had a flick through that, and I think the security will probably be a bit more stringent than it might have been a couple of months ago, but that's something we'll just have to deal with and embrace it, really.
Will Somerville. And the Australian swimmer Shayna Jack has held back tears as she walked into a briefing on her positive test for a banned substance. The 20-year-old faces a 4-year ban after testing positive to a muscle growth agent during a training camp ahead of the recent World Championships in South Korea. And that's the news.
Tomorrow morning, David Downs is in complete remission from the lymphoma that nearly killed him. He had to go to Australia for the treatment. Could it be done here? DeRay McKesson is one of the most prominent Black Lives Matter activists, joining the movement after Michael Brown was shot by a white police officer in Ferguson, Missouri. And mid-year on Ultravox and buying a hot amplifier from Malcolm McLaren. Join me, Kim Hill, tomorrow morning from 8 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast for Met Service through to midnight tomorrow. The watches and warnings for much of the country for strong wind, heavy rain and heavy snow are still in place. Here's the forecast now. Northland to Kapiti, including Coromandel and the Central High Country. Showers, some heavy hail and squally thunderstorms are possible from Manawatu southwards, easing tomorrow morning. Bay of Plenty, Gisborne, Hawke's Bay, mainly fine. A few showers this afternoon and evening. Wairarapa and Wellington, mainly fine, though a few showers in Wairarapa spreading to Wellington tomorrow morning. Possible thunderstorms with hail in Wairarapa, becoming fine tomorrow afternoon. Nelson, Marlborough, Canterbury and North Otago, scattered rain, snow above 500 metres from tonight, clearing for a time tomorrow, then returning south of Christchurch tomorrow evening. Bulla to Fiordland, the remainder of Otago and Southland, rain, squally thunderstorms are possible, clearing everywhere for a time tonight or tomorrow morning. The rain spreading from the south tomorrow afternoon and snow down to 200 metres in the south overnight. And for the Chathams, occasional showers. 7 and 6:30.
Thanks very much, Paul. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Alex Perrottet. Advocates say it's unfair to put the blame on international students who could be caught out if dodgy agencies lie in their visa applications. Under a new interpretation of the rules, the final blame will lie with the students if fraud has taken place, even if it's without their knowledge. And that's led some to criticise for the government for reneging on pledges made while in opposition. Laura Dooney explains.
Under the proposal, international students will bear the blame and have their visa cancelled if their education agents give false information in their applications, even if the student is unaware it's happened. If their visa's cancelled, students will have to apply for a new one. Immigration lawyer Alistair McClymont says the proposed change comes after an ombudsman investigation into the treatment of Indian students whose visas were cancelled in 2017 because an immigration agency had used false information in their applications.
Basically, what the Ombudsman concluded out of this investigation is that the legislation did, in fact, give Immigration New Zealand the power to place all of the blame solely on the applicants, regardless of their knowledge of what the agents were doing. So Immigration New Zealand now want to interpret that very strictly.
He says in the past, immigration considered students and other applicants' explanations as to how false information was submitted. The Union Network of Migrants coordinator Mandeep Singh Bella explains why agents send through false information without students knowing it.
In order to make a buck, they would go to any length, whether to falsify the documents or whether to forge any of the existing documents or whether to add any other document to ensure that students get the visa and then they can make their commission.
Mr Singh Bella says students can pay tens of thousands of dollars to get their visas. He says denying students the chance to explain any dishonesty found in an application would be appalling.
Everyone deserves the right to have a fair say if somebody is alleged to have done something. Just simply, deporting them or saying that we're not going to hear your side of the story, this is a decision, would absolutely be unfair.
The New Zealand International Students Association President Lucas Christen says foreign students go through agency because they're told it's easier. But he says they're often unaware of exactly what's been sent in their name.
I've talked to one student who saw her final application that was sent through to the institute. And actually what she saw was that some of her grades had been falsified. So she sent in her transcript and that had been changed by the education agent.
He says the student sorted it out, her correct grades were sent through, and she still got her visa. Mr Christen says keeping a closer eye on private training establishments, or PTEs, could help the situation.
It's difficult to regulate agents that are overseas and outside the New Zealand jurisdiction, but the New Zealand government is more than capable of regulating PTEs and ranking them and looking at what kind of education agents they use.
Edwin Paul of the New Zealand-India Trade Alliance says putting all the onus on students removes the responsibility for agents to provide accurate applications. He says a regulatory body should be set up to make sure agencies aren't lying, as happens in other countries.
We won't be inventing the wheel, but we need to be policing, managing, educating, and evolving the agents in the right direction. They just can't be finders and claim a fees for that. They need to be responsible for the process of making sure that the student is fit for purpose to study in New Zealand.
Mr Paul says agents have been made a necessary part of the system for international students. A spokesperson for the Immigration Minister, Ian Lees-Galloway, says he's aware of the proposed changes and supports there being discussions with stakeholders. She says a final decision won't be made until after a period of consultation. In Wellington, for Checkpoint, ko Laura Dooney tēnei.
At almost 13 minutes past 6, we're just going to have a pause for an apology. In an interview broadcast on Tuesday on Checkpoint with the Minister for Children, Tracy Martin, this regarded the protest at Parliament, you might remember, over the uplift of Māori children. We asked her about comments made that day by Green Party co-leader Marama Davidson to the protesters. Now, we reported that Ms Davidson told the crowds the uplift of children amounted to torture and abuse. That was in fact incorrect. Marama Davidson used the words trauma and abuse when telling the crowd that the state must stop the practice. So Marama Davidson did not use the word torture, but trauma. Checkpoint apologises for that mistake and acknowledges that the word was incorrect. 13 and a half minutes past 6, you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. A burst water main caused flooding on streets in Queenstown today, trapping people in their houses. The rupture was caused when a council contractor hit the pipe earlier today, causing water to cascade onto Thompson Street and then flow down the hill. Emergency services were called after reports of flooding at the St Moritz Hotel. I spoke to Philip Smith while he was stuck inside a house that he was renovating on Glasgow Street.
Well, I believe a contractor hit a water pipe along Thompson Street in Queenstown, and that's ensued with a river flowing down over a bank, creating a bit of a mudslide, which has then run in down towards the St. Moritz Hotel down Brunswick Street and down towards our beautiful lake, unfortunately.
Right, and then you're in a house doing some work, right, and you're stuck there.
Yeah, we came through maybe just before it, I guess, because I came through, there was nothing happening then, but there was the contractors have been there for the last couple of days, sort of stopping traffic while they're doing whatever, I think maybe for a hotel. But yeah, I'm not sure if that's what the case was. But then my mother came through and she got turned around because they must have had the incident. And then so she turned around, came down up through past St. Moritz, and she sort of saw it just as it was happening. And she went through the hotel sort of entrance, and mud was sort of going down through there. And then, we've been haven't been able to go anywhere.
What can you see, and how much water is there at the moment?
They've still got the cones down there. The road's still closed, but they've been letting some people through. The neighbour here, she's just had a hip operation, so they let them through. But the top road's not too bad, but that's where the water's coming from. So we've got the digger there, and but it's the road below that's much worse. That's sort of pushed some cars around that are being parked on the street.
Yeah, we've seen some amazing photos of water rushing down and those cars being shunted across the road. How cold is it there? Do you think some of this water might turn to ice?
No. We had snow this morning.
Right.
It was snowing. It was about sort of 1-2 degrees, but it's warmed up now and it's just been raining all day, on and off. So no, it's not cold enough. We've definitely got fresh snow up on the mountains, but it's not cold enough to snow. Overnight it'll get probably below zero though, but I'm sure they'll have that sort of sorted by then.
Philip Smith there in Queenstown. We hope he eventually did get out of that house he was renovating. He said he was doing a bit of painting there. The council contractors hope to fix the pipe by 8 o'clock this evening. It's currently 16 past 6 o'clock. More weather news. West coasters have been told to light the fire and stay home as storm conditions and king tides start to pound Westland. Swells of up to 8 metres and torrential rain are expected to batter the coastline. The worst is expected to hit on Sunday. That's according to Westland Mayor Bruce Smith, who spoke to us at high tide today.
I'm out on the Blaketown side of the river. The waves at the moment are washing right over the end of the breakwater where we normally park, and they're significant. In fact, just watched there was only one fishing boat out, and I think it's the Galileo. I couldn't actually read, I couldn't actually see clearly the name of it. It comes through the bar. Unbelievable. I've been informed that we're closing Sunset Point in Hokitika. I've been down the end of Hampden Street in the Hokitika Township, and the erosion, the sea is cutting in. It's not disastrous yet, but it's definitely cutting in. I went to Kamara to have a look at by the Serpentine, big waves, just massive waves, and at the here in Greymouth, it's a wild day now. We're told there's 10.5 metre swells out to sea,
right, rolling
into 7.5s to 8.5s by the shore. It's bang on high tide here at the moment. So we're now it'll obviously decrease from here. We're told that for the next 3 days, Civil Defence have advised that they are predicting very hazardous conditions, and so it's really important that coasters you light the fire, stay home, don't go and have a look. We don't want to hear about someone who's fallen in and ends up dying. It's just something we don't need.
No. And Bruce, what about those people that do live very close to the shore? Because we know some people have had to just abandon their homes. We had Cyclone Fehi last year, and we can see that the coast is just encroaching on people's homes and the terrain there. So are there particular warnings for those that live rather close?
You'll find that anyone who lives close to the sea is well and truly up to scratch on whether what they should be doing. But I think it feels like a sou'westerly at the moment. It's cold and it's blowing like you wouldn't believe. And when you get that combination with a king tide, it's not a good combination.
Westland Mayor Bruce Smith, he says everyone's up to speed on the advice there. If you're not, it's pretty simple. Just stay home. Rug up. Stay next to the fire or the heat pump. It's 19 minutes past 6. Health workers have confirmed, actually before we get to that, whether we're going to Africa there, but before we get to that, we do have a bit of feedback. Again, it's been streaming in on Anita Blake Person's story about free fees and what courses students benefiting from that policy are doing. They seem to be medical courses at Otago as well as business courses at Auckland University. This texter says the point of first year free was to enable people who otherwise wouldn't have had access to tertiary education of any description, not to give students already there and doing well, which is terrific, help. Yes, that was the idea, yes. And Vicky says, I benefited from no fees after UE and bursary because education was available and affordable for all. Otherwise, university would have been unaffordable. My generation robbed the next two generations of what we took for granted. I'm so grateful. We owe it to our younger generations to have access to education and be the best that they can. Thanks very much for getting in touch, Vicky, and everyone else. Keep it coming in. To Africa now, health workers have confirmed a fourth case of Ebola in the large border city of Goma. Now, this city lies between Rwanda and Democratic Republic of Congo. The latest infection has been announced by the World Health Organization a year to the day since the outbreak in the DRC. More than 1,800 people have died. Overnight, Rwanda closed its border with the DRC, but it opened it again after advice from health authorities and anger from locals. The ongoing conflict in the DRC has made tracking and tackling the outbreak even more difficult and dangerous. And in spite of a major public health campaign, many people still believe in inaccurate myths and rumours. The BBC's Anne Soy has returned to the epicentre of the outbreak in Beni City. This is 350 kilometres to the north of Goma, where she saw firsthand the challenges health workers are facing.
We've just arrived at a clinic in the outskirts of Beni and the contamination team is here ready to work, but the gate is locked and for a moment they do not know where the staff are. They say there has been resistance to the Ebola message here and therefore they're not surprised that the medics who should be working here are not around. After several phone calls, one of them has arrived now and is opening the gate. Jonas Kambale looks nervous. He tells me people from the community had attacked them.
They are angry that we referred an Ebola patient to the treatment center. So we ran away. The other patients we were attending to also fled. We called soldiers to come help us protect the clinic. The attackers say people die when they go for Ebola treatment. So they accuse us of being accomplices in those deaths.
There has been a confirmed case of Ebola here, and therefore it's very important to decontaminate the room he'd been in. They're now spraying the staircase leading into the room, the door frame, inside the room, the bed. I can see one of the health workers has removed 2 mattresses from the room. The beddings are burned. A short distance from the clinic, we've come to a home where we're told a person died of Ebola and there's a funeral going on. Tension is high. I can see people gathered in small groups talking. The one road is barricaded and we've been advised to leave. Many people here in eastern Congo still do not believe that Ebola exists. There are myths and conspiracies going on within the community. Health facilities, including Ebola treatment centers, have been attacked throughout this outbreak. Dr. Richard Koja is the head of the Alliance for International Medical Action, which runs most of the treatment facilities.
Ces attaques qui ont ciblé les personnels soignants aussi, on connaît des confrères.
There have been attacks against health workers. We know of fellow doctors who were killed. That has a negative impact on the fight against this epidemic.
Dozens of armed groups operate in the region affected by the outbreak. Health workers face risks at many levels. This is the most complex outbreak of Ebola ever. But all is not lost. Every so often, they celebrate the recovery of some patients.
I contracted Ebola while taking care of my husband. He died and I refused to come for treatment at first. But by God's grace, I'm now well. I received good care. We had heard that people get injected in the neck and die, but I haven't seen that. It's a lie.
Back in the village, there are many rumors. They say people die when they come here. But now I have seen that is not true.
As these survivors return to the village, they take with them an indisputable message that it's possible to beat Ebola.
And that was Anne Soy reporting on the Ebola epidemic in the DRC at 6:24 to Yemen now, where Houthi rebels have used missiles and drones to attack a military parade marking the graduation of new government recruits. Up to 36 people have been killed in the attack, which took place in the war-torn country's temporary capital of Aden. An explosion hit a military camp belonging to the Yemeni security forces, backed by the United Arab Emirates, which is the major member of the Saudi-led coalition battling the Houthi rebels. BBC correspondent Nawal Al-Maghafi is in Yemen and sent this report.
It was meant to be a celebration in the midst of a brutal war. Hundreds of soldiers on their graduation day in their freshly pressed uniforms with senior officers watching on. Then this. These are United Arab Emirates forces supporting the Yemeni government. Dozens were killed, one of them a senior military official.
We launched a new type of missile for the first time. It let us hit the right target, achieving our political, military and intelligence goals.
In Aden, the United Arab Emirates has played a major role. Recently, they announced that they're pulling some forces out of Yemen. So today's attack raises questions about whether their retreat has created a security vacuum in the south of the country. In another neighborhood today, more violence. Suicide bombing targeted a busy police station. It's unclear if the two attacks are linked. Today's attack was a bold show of strength by the Houthis and a message that even they can attack from the air. But for the people here in areas under their control, there's a fear spreading about how the coalition is going to retaliate. The government here is blaming the Houthis' backers, Iran, for this missile strike. Once again, foreign powers are accused of causing misery in one of the world's most beleaguered countries.
That was Nawal Al-Maghafi reporting from Yemen at almost 6:27. Two men in San Diego have impounded thousands of e-scooters that they say have been left littered about the US city and are endangering pedestrians. It sparked a battle with companies that have flooded cities around the world with the two-wheelers. Jane Lanhee Lee reports.
Electric scooters were supposed to make American cities greener and cleaner. But in San Diego and many other cities, they're the source of a brewing battle as some residents and businesses are getting fed up with users leaving them discarded on sidewalks and on private property.
You'll see we do have signage posted here to let the riders know that this whole area right here is all private property and they are not allowed to park here.
And repo men John Heinkel and Dan Borelli saw an opportunity. Their small outfit called Scoot Scoop has been towing away scooters left scattered around the city for the last year.
We celebrated our 10,000th scooter a few months ago, and I think we are now up to about 14,000 scooters.
But scooter makers Bird and Lime are fighting back, suing Heinkel and Borelli, accusing them of unlawfully impounding the scooters and demanding a ransom to get them returned. What's more, Lime, in its statement to Reuters, says Scoot Scoop has repeatedly taken scooters that are responsibly parked and calls it a property theft scheme. Scoot Scoop says it has the right to impound scooters under California law if left on private property, and it invoices the companies at least $50 per vehicle to return them. Scoot Scoop plans to auction off some scooters if it doesn't get paid.
We don't want to turn it into a war. We want to see coexistence. We want to see the scooters survive. We want to see people out there enjoying the scooters. We want to see them riding them to and from work, reducing the amount of drives, the amount of cars on the road. But until these companies can work with a company such as ourselves or find a way to implement procedures to keep their product clean and neat and orderly, it's going to remain the same.
Cities in the United States and Europe have struggled with how to regulate the scooters amid complaints from residents and businesses that they endanger pedestrians and clutter sidewalks, even when parked responsibly.
Jane Lanhee-Lee reporting there. And I'll tell you what, the most vocal people tonight have been you, the listener. There's been so much feedback coming in, particularly on Labor's or the government's fees-free policy. So we're going to end with that. One texter has got in touch. We can afford this policy. We did in the past with progressive taxation and a belief in free education and health as essential in a social democracy. The only thing that's changed was the new ideology, neoliberalism. And look where that's got us. Thanks for that point of view. There's probably time for one more. I like the concept of equalising education. It will give the ability for a bunch of good kids to get into positions that we'll need in 20 years or so. More local engineers, programmers and lawyers. My problem is that I pushed hard for my kids to go to uni as I got my trade as a kid. Now I'm 50. My mates' kids do trades and are way better off than my kids with their debt. This is the conundrum. I'll leave that with you. You can listen and look back at all our stories on the website. That's Checkpoint. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next week.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The family of a woman who inhaled asbestos and died from cancer says they're nervously waiting to see if ACC can appeal a High Court decision to have her expensive bills paid. A burst water main in Queenstown has caused chaos in the centre of town today, rendering several streets impassable for vehicles. The trade war between the US and China has been ramped up today, with Donald Trump imposing more tariffs on another $450 billion worth of Chinese goods. And 2 senior Samoan nurses who pleaded guilty to manslaughter after the 2 MMR vaccine deaths of 2 infants have been sentenced to 5 years in prison. Those are the headlines. Our next news is at 7.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
To fill those skill shortages is not about our ability to train, it's about our ability to find people who want to be trained.
Lately with me, Karen Hayes, your late night eye on the latest headlines and the people who